This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible by DEV.TEAM. One specific genre in which the Dreamcast saw very little, if any, representation in is the run and gun. The closest thing we can think of that was released in North America to a Dreamcast run and gunner was Cannon Spike by Capcom in 2000. Thankfully, DEV.TEAM saw fit to release a much more traditional run and gun style game with Gunlord, released in 2012 to both the Dreamcast and the Neo Geo as a direct continuation of the events in Last Hope, which we checked out in episode 105.
In Gunlord, hero Gordon Gaiden is on a mission to find and save his missing wife Vanessa after bursting out of confinement at his trial in about the most extreme way possible. Taking 3 parts Turrican, 1 part Castlevania, and even chucking in a pure shmup level, Gunlord is a pretty neat amalgamation of design choices. But is it any good? Let's take a closer look.
Gunlord's run and gun type gameplay is pretty solid overall. Like most action platformers and run and guns in specific, movement is side-scrolling at a fixed rate. There is, as always, a button assigned to jumping and shooting, but also for a few extra functions. In terms of movement, pulling the L trigger will morph Gordon into a ball form much like in Metroid, complete with bombs when the fire button is pressed. This will help in getting through several tight spaces. You can also grapple and climb special blue walls and dismount them by jumping or holding down and jumping from the ones you hang from.
Your main weapon is fired with the X button and can be one of 3 main types. The default spread shot fires in 5 directions but is somewhat weak. The bounce weapon has reflecting shots while the fire button is tapped, but narrow and rapid when the fire button is held. The Phoenix shot is much more powerful but only fires in a linear manner and depends more on manual aiming than the other 2.
Aiming your shots can take a bit of dexterity since you will move while firing diagonally, and you can only fire down if you're jumping or hanging, otherwise you'll simply crouch. There are also additional weapons which might not be able to be aimed as well, such as the Super Wave Shot. And if you need to get rid of a troublesome pest with barriers in the way, a powerful snake beam can be activated with the R trigger that reaches through barriers and obstacles to decimate whatever it touches. The snake beam has limited use before it needs to recharge though, and its power is indicated by a gauge on the bottom of the screen. However, it's sort of hard to control, and it'll flail around in ways that you may not expect. You can also recharge the snake beam with purple orbs.
The Y button is mapped to the Super Wave maneuver, which is indicated by a stalk in the bottom right hand corner and basically acts much like a screen clearing bomb, just like in any shooting game. There are all sorts of additional Super Wave pickups scattered around each stage, so liberal use isn't necessarily a bad thing. The Super Wave is extremely handy to clear away a ton of enemies and their shots when the screen gets crowded.
Anticipating your opposition's position before you reach them to take them out is, in the end, the best way to attack the game, but because of this, a lot of playtime will likely be required to memorize it all. Getting a little further each time is more or less the name of the game, and there's a lot of replay value because of this, if a bit unintentional.
Thankfully, there are going to be all kinds of nifty things to find all over the stage that will help out along the way. Hidden platforms will dispense weapon tiles, health, or additional super waves when shot or jumped on. Several more can be revealed when shot and can lead to new areas filled with collectible gems and even free lives. In fact, there are all kinds of free lives in every stage, so with practice, a player could totally get a huge life stock and even extra credits.
With so much to explore, Gunlord will last anyone a very long time, but it's not without problems. Movement isn't completely perfect and can lead to a lot of cheap hits. Respawns can happen on spikes and hazards, and especially while jumping between smaller platforms, it can be harder than it should be to keep from overshooting your landing or getting out of an enemy's way. Despite this though, it doesn't take long to adjust and adapt to make some decent progress.
Another design choice that kind of complicates the slight movement and jumping issues is Gordon's size. Your character sprite is pretty big when it comes down to it, and as a result, getting hit is going to happen a lot more than we'd have liked. Still, with practice and memorization, getting through the huge labyrinthian exploration stages can be done in under 10 minutes.
Finally, the scale of the stages in Gunlord can be daunting to say the least. With 9 stages, many of which are enormous in size, it's easy to get lost and distracted along the way. Perhaps a more linear structure could have made things a bit better navigation-wise, but with enough time, getting through any stage should take a short enough time with no filler. With such a huge emphasis on exploration, the actual scoring in Gunlord kind of takes a back seat, but it also has boosts for those that want to get as high a count as possible. Basically, your score comes from, well, shooting and destroying as much as possible. Picking up snake beam orbs will give you a slight bonus as well.
In addition, there are purple gems strewn about every on-foot stage for Gordon to pick up. There is a counter on the bottom left hand of the screen that shows your progress of the stage you're in. Some of the gems can be very well hidden, so to get a perfect score will mean a lot of exploration and a lot of patience.
There are small and large gems to collect in Gunlord, and collecting all of the large gems in a stage will grant an extra credit. Very helpful, especially in the unrelenting later stages of the game.
There is no end stage bonus in Gunlord. Instead, there is a tally screen that shows how many small and large gems were collected, how many extends were obtained, and how much of the stage and game have been completed up to that point, followed by your current score and total playtime.
The scoring really isn't especially important in Gunlord outside of getting extends and extra credits, but there is still an online leaderboard that can be accessed on DEV.TEAM's website with a password, so you too can see how you rank worldwide. So the gameplay in Gunlord is a little overwhelming. But you know what's not overwhelming? The awesome presentation held on this disc. If it's a fantastic atmosphere you want in your Shmuproidvanias, this is it.
Like the visuals. Look at these visuals. The 240p splendor you're seeing right now is just fantastic. Beautiful backgrounds, all kinds of parallax, colorful, bright enemies, stage elements, and huge bosses are like a delicious multi-layered visual cake. Parallax cake.
And how about the sound? The sound effects are crazy good and totally work for everything that they're used for in Gunlord. And that's some excellent stuff, but good god, the music here is just unreal. Raphael Dill has seriously outdone himself with the OST in Gunlord. Every single track is just phenomenal.
The super cheesy exposition at the beginning of the game is the stuff of legends as well. With all kinds of snarky one-liners seemingly taken directly from 90s arcades to the over-the-top scenario that Gordon bursts himself into, then out of, is all just super great.
So Gunlord may have some issues, but with patience, there's also a lot to love about it. In the end, just how does it stack up? Let's take a look. The controls in Gunlord can be a little slippery and the jumping a bit iffy between smaller platforms. The snake beam can also be a bit confusing.
But a little practice will make these issues disappear.
The challenge contained in Gunlord is undeniable.
Respawning into spikes and hazards makes for the wrong kind of challenge though.
At 9 often mammoth stages, you'll be at Gunlord for a very long time.
Exploration and practice, not to mention the online leaderboards, is sure to drive up the replay.
Stunning backdrops and colorful set pieces make for a feast for the eyes.
Amazing mechanical and enemy design is the icing on a delicious parallax cake.
One of the most incredible OSTs in run and gun history sets the pace perfectly in Gunlord.
Every sound effect sounds great for their intended purpose.
Taking Turrican and jamming it together with Metroid and throwing in a pure shmup stage for good measure makes for an awesome mashup.
Online leaderboards and more emphasis on exploration takes the shortness of your typical shooting game right out of the equation. This is one to stick with.
Gunlord is pretty darn good. While it feels kind of like the exploration takes way too long, that's just my need for to-the-point shmup talking. In the end, this is the kind of game any action gamer can get into, since it holds a little bit of everything. Gunlord gets a 4 out of 5. Getting Gunlord is quite a bit easier than NGDev's earlier titles. It can be obtained on HuCast.com for just shy of €70. Limited edition Dragon boxes can be found at Video Games New York as well. No matter the way you go about it, Gunlord will last you a good long time, with great sights to see and awesome tunage through the whole thing. Atmosphere you want in your come on, I wrote this thing. Shmuproidvanias.